This is the most famous celebrity near-death experience story, and I think it's fascinating because she goes into great detail. I've done other stories about NDEs, and they were kind of simple and they didn't go into the greatest detail. Well, Elizabeth Taylor did not disappoint. We all remember her role as Cleopatra and so many other movies, and one of the most beautiful, violet-eyed celebrities we've probably ever had in modern times. So, of course, I guess it comes to no surprise as she had one of the most illustrious and detailed near-death experience. I thought we should talk about it today because it's amazing. I had to wear the sparkles because of Elizabeth Taylor. Wish I had some diamonds to put on, right? So, she was in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. That was a good one too, right? But as she got older, she started having some health problems, and we kind of already remember that. She, at one time, was battling pneumonia and went under surgery, during which she was clinically dead for 5 minutes. She later shared this story publicly. She was on the Oprah show also in 1992 and talked about this. So while she was actually dead for those several minutes, she said she felt herself floating in a peaceful, out-of-body state, surrounded by a bright white light. She was very specific about that. She even said she encountered her late husband, Mike Todd. Do you remember him? And they do say that she had never stopped loving him. So Mike Todd actually died in a plane crash way back in 1958, but I don't think she ever kind of got over him. So in her account where she runs into her late husband, Mike Todd told her when she was on the other side in the bright white light that it wasn't her time yet, and that she had more to accomplish in life, and that he was urging her to return back to her human body. So she said when she woke up, she said she was left with this newfound peace about death, and she no longer feared dying. And she described it as extremely comforting and being just enveloped in love. She said, this is really wild, she said it felt like she was also enveloped in this feeling of being in liquid mercury. I mean, I just kind of imagine that. Imagine like love being so tangible, it just feels like just liquid mercury. I call that like plasma, just being surrounded by all of that. I just think that's amazing. So this story really stands out because of her immense fame and her willingness to openly discuss this back in the early 90s, where people really weren't talking about this very much yet. And this story combines with verifiable medical circumstances. She had a vivid personal narrative, and this resonated with many, many people and really changed people's mind about the other side because they believed her. So following this near-death experience, she went on to live many, many more years, still had a very remarkable life. But it's interesting because after her NDE, she went on to have many more years of philanthropy, giving to charity. She was an advocate for the AIDS Society. And this was all after her NDE. So this is fascinating. I mean, her detailed account that she shared on multiple occasions, not just Oprah, but of course she was also on Larry King. And, she talks about her own reflections since then. Now, of course, she has since passed away. And when she talks about it time and time again, the exact timeline of what happened kind of shifts a little bit, but the main story of it does not shift at all. That's really interesting. So let's go over the more descriptive parts and let's do a little deeper dive into what happened to her. So let's go through what exactly happened to her. Did she really have an NDE? Well, in 1961, when she was in her late 20s and she was at the height of her Hollywood stardom, she was in London working on the famous film Cleopatra. So she'd been plagued by health issues throughout her entire life. Did you know that? I didn't know that. She had scoliosis. She had recurrent respiratory problems. And so during the time when she was filming Cleopatra, she contracted a severe case of pneumonia, another terrible respiratory infection. And this condition rapidly worsened because she worked so hard on Cleopatra. It took all the time and energy, and it just like brought her system down. So she really got pneumonia bad at that point. She could barely breathe and was rushed to the hospital. And according to reports at the time, they said her life hung in the balance and her illness was so dire that some outlets actually prematurely announced her death. So in the hospital, she underwent an emergency tracheotomy. This is a surgical procedure where they create an opening in your windpipe right about here. You can feel your trachea right there. And of course, this helps you breathe. During this operation, she died on the operating table. And it was stated that her heart stopped for 5 minutes. Now, try to hold your breath. Like if you hold it for 30 seconds, even a minute, that's really hard to do. Imagine 5 minutes. I can't believe she didn't have any brain deterioration after that. So medical staff actually declared her clinically dead before reviving her. And this moment became the backdrop for her NDE story that she was later to tell in public. So that tells me this gives much more credence to the NDE because she was reported. I mean, there's medical documentation that she was dead for 5 minutes. So when she went on to tell her near-death experience, she described the experience with vivid clarity. You know, it wasn't just kind of like very blasé and just very vague, very, very specific of what she encountered. She said that as her body was laying there lifeless, she felt herself, like her spirit and soul, separate from her body. And she then felt immediately a state of weightlessness and calm. This is what she said. She then said she was moving through a tunnel, She said it was like a tunnel-like sensation of moving through a tunnel very, very quickly. And she was moving through this tunnel towards an intense, radiant white light. These were her words. She felt the white light was both blinding and comforting at the same time. And in her exact words, she said it was the most peaceful, glorious feeling. And she said it was unlike anything she's ever known or experienced her entire life. And again, her quote was, she said it was the sensation of being suspended and submerged in liquid mercury. I love that quote because it's so specific. I just haven't heard anyone describe it like that before. So at the heart of the NDE, though, was her experience with her late husband, Mike Todd. And yeah, I know, I've read this before. It was quoted that she considered Mike Todd the greatest love of her life. So Mike Todd was also a film producer. He tragically died in a plane crash in March 1958. And, you know, she was devastated from this loss. This is something I believe she never got over. So in her vision, though, she said that she saw him so clearly. And he was also surrounded by a luminous light around him. And she said it wasn't that she could hear him talking, but it was like they were having telepathic communication or like an emotional exchange between the two of them, rather than like, I'm speaking to you and you're hearing me, right? It was just this mental exchange. So Mike Todd conveyed to her, Elizabeth, Liz, you can't stay here. This is not your time. You have to go back. You still have important work to do in the world. So Elizabeth Taylor later recalled feeling a profound sense of love and reassurance from Mike Todd, as if he was guiding her gently but firmly back to the human world. So she said she resisted at first. She wanted to stay in this beautiful realm of love, that feeling like enveloped with liquid mercury of love, and to be with her great love, Mike Todd. She did not want to leave, but he kept urging her, and she said, I didn't want to come back. But Mike Todd's presence and his message gave her a sense of purpose, and she felt herself being pulled back into her body in the hospital. Suddenly, she said she was awake again and gasping for air through the tracheotomy tube. And she was surrounded by these stunned doctors and nurses who had fought to resuscitate her, that they brought her back, that she was gone, clinically dead for 5 minutes, and now she was back. Yeah, I would have been shocked too. I would have been shocked. So, the aftermath. So, when Taylor regained consciousness, she was alive, but she was very, very weak. And the experience of her near-death experience left this indelible mark on her. And she spoke time and time again of how she was not afraid to die anymore, that this just changed her life. She started talking about it. I believe the first interview was 1992 on Oprah, where she talked about being dead for 5 minutes. She talked that death is not an end. And that's what I say on this channel all the time. Death is not an end. It's really just a continuation on. Whether we decide to come back on this earthly plane or whether we stay in heaven, I guess that's up to us and God, right? But we don't end. It's what I say all the time. It's what I've witnessed, at least with hospice patients. I haven't witnessed this amazing story. And she noted physical details that reinforced her belief in the experience. She claimed that when she popped out of her body, that she was in the operating room and that she rose above in this out-of-body state. She described specifics that were going on in the hospital room, the operating room in the hospital, that she couldn't have known, she couldn't have seen. This, however, part of the story is unverified, so it's anecdotal, but I don't think she had any reason to lie about this. My God, one of the most famous women on earth, a multimillionaire, many relationships. I mean, why would she lie? There's no reason to, right? So the encounter with Mike Todd, her late husband, that lingered with her. She felt it gave her a renewed sense of a mission. So now she really had some extra purpose besides just acting on this planet. At the time, though, right after her NDE, she said she wasn't really sure what her mission was. She didn't really grasp what that was going to be. And in the years that followed, her life took on new dimensions. So she won her second Oscar for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in 1966. But more significantly, she became a tireless advocate for AIDS research and awareness in the 1980s. So some biographers and fans speculate that the purpose Todd hinted at during her NDE manifested in all this charitable and humanitarian work she ended up doing later in her life. And you can't imagine, but this saved countless lives and cemented her legacy as a philanthropist, not just this famous Hollywood actress. Talk about having a purpose. Amazing, right? Because you think sometimes charitable acts, it helps if you're a little bit famous. It does. And public reaction. So, Elizabeth Taylor's openness about her NDE, which I love, was unusual for a celebrity of her stature, especially at that time in the early 90s when she started talking about this publicly. And, back at that time, I remember people just started to talk about it. So it was still pretty new and I think pretty brave to just put yourself out there and talk about this. So she did talk about it also on Larry King Live. And this captivated audiences. They were riveted to her story because it was so detailed and they loved her. And so I think a lot of people believed her story as absolutely genuine. And she did have, and people believe, a spiritual revelation because she didn't talk about that stuff prior. And all of a sudden, she's moving through this tunnel toward a white, radiant light and feeling love like she's never loved before or felt love before, and then sees Mike Todd, the love of her life. So that story remains one of the most iconic celebrity NDEs, I feel like. She did have a scar from the tracheotomy she had on her neck. It's visible in later years, but, you could cover that with makeup and things like that. But as she got older, it was more visible to see. And I mean, if you think about it, it's just a subtle testament to what she went through. I mean, this is all true. So, she went through multiple marriages, heartbreak, health struggles, a lot of loss in her life. And this higher sense of meaning that she obtained after her NDE, I mean, that guided her until she herself died in 2011. So, what do you think about that? Do you believe her? Do you believe that story? I have no reason not to. I think she was completely authentic in what she went through. I believe her. I'd be curious what you guys think. Please comment below. And thanks for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.